Syncing up the audio. Let's frickin' go. No, no, not that one. That one. Alright, we are back for more. Part 3. Again, with Eternal specifically, you know, like, the hard thing about evaluating Eternal is there is just so much to talk about, and I often lose track because of how much shit there just is to discuss. I guess I can look at the level select a bit more. There are some things I forgot to point out about the level select, I guess, the past couple of times around. Yeah, I forgot to mention that while I like the concept of throwing back, you know, to Game Boy 4, I wouldn't, you know, use nearest neighboring as a way to do it. I feel like the nearest neighboring habit was taken from ZX. I forgot to mention this game also takes heavy inspiration from ZX, which is also how the Megadata data was implemented originally, but I can talk about that a lot later. There are some other ZX elements of inspiration that I'll talk about some other time. For Robot Masters that you haven't picked up the letter for, obviously it's the obligatory beat letter. You can see there's like a green pixel in the bottom right corner of the question mark, which is strange. Yeah. But some of these Robot Masters, a rare few of them, it's beating them with the Buster isn't something that's easily replicable. But I do have some of the weaknesses for them, so I don't like to use weaknesses against Robot Masters. I like to use the Buster whenever possible to show off their patterns, but we have Illusion's weakness. We can decode his shit. So it's no consequence coming here. This stage has a lot that I have to say about it. Interesting tiles by Mexican Sunflower. The background is minimalistic, but acceptable. A hint as to how some of Time Tangent might have looked. We have a drawbridge chain, kind of here for no reason. They're just kind of randomly in front, and because they're completely black, they just kind of blend in and look like random seams in the background. I do like how some of these blinking lights show up in the tiles themselves, and the fact that it's not actually nighttime. It's very much day, and this is a goddamn illusion. Oh! Some of the illusions in this stage are completely cosmetic, and others try to be game-oriented, but are still completely cosmetic. Nice flowers. We've seen those before, sadly. Here we come across the obligatory J-Tellies that I talked about in Frigid Man stage. Well, rather they have the same AI as the regular Tellies, but 4 HP, which is kind of a mouthful for a Telly. Again, it's like, you could argue it's like, oh, it's an illusion, not everything is what it seems. They have 2 extra they have 3 extra, they have way more HP than their tiny sprite would insinuate. And, while that sounds cool on paper, it's not really like a fun gameplay thing. Like, no one likes when like a tiny enemy has like 20 HP or whatever. I know it's a hyperbole and these only have 4, but it's still like a kind of a pain. We also come across a Met. Again, the activation radius of 5 means it kind of opens up the moment you scroll it on and get too close, as opposed to making the activation radius 4 or 3. And that, again, that will show up, that will become a problem in this particular stage. We also come across Hammer Joes, and like I said before, you can do this! I'm gonna go eat some pizza real quick. Good shit. Maybe drink some water too while I'm at it. So, yeah, I know I'm kind of stealing Nico's coffee gag, but you can indeed do this. It's a thing you can do. It would feel intentional, like, oh, it's an illusion. Not everything is what it seems in this godforsaken stage. But, you know, the problem with it is, you know, we already saw these two enemies in other stages that weren't illusion themed. The Hammer Joes work exactly the same when they show up in Clampman, and the normal tellies work exactly the same when they show up in Frigid. Which is a problem. So, if it was intentional, it doesn't feel intentional because they show up in other places that aren't illusion related, and, well, the variants of these particular enemies, the normal variants of these particular enemies work the exact same way. We have like a statue of Illusion Man himself, generating a holographic projection of an actual wall. So you kind of have to take this 10 HP statue down to get rid of the actual wall that isn't an illusion, but is still like a projection. Maybe some kind of solid light BS going on, I don't know. We also saw, as you might have just briefly seen, sort of like an amalgamation of, what is it, like a bomb thrown in a Pucapelli? That was one of the first enemies ever implemented in Eternal, I believe. Kind of taken from a DeviantArt sprite sheet, I think. Presumably free to use, whatever. Now we can finally talk about this enemy. The design is, I have mixed feelings about it. It likes to spam this rather aggressively when it's close, meaning that if you're in the diagonal vicinity and really close, you'll just be kind of like knockback comboed again. And on top of that, it uses the same sprite as a certain enemy in Weatherman stage from Dr. Wily's final attack. I really should ask Skipper about this. My presumption is that when Paige was receiving crowdsourced graphics, some idiot just ripped it from dev footage of Dr. Wily's final attack and gave it to him, and Paige was just none the wiser. And the alternate possibility is that Skipper himself submitted the sprite, which, I don't know. See what I mean? And yeah, this is the problem with having the activation radius being 5. The frickin' camo met, or the Alu metal as it's known in this game, is kind of frickin' opens up like five blocks isn't like the moment you scroll it on, but it's still pretty close. Presuming when Mega Man's at the center of the camera, at the center of the screen, he has 8 blocks to the right to work with. So this means that when you complete this Yoku jump, the Met will instantly open up, which is A, kind of annoying and unfair, but B, it also instantly blows the cover that it's an illusion, defeating the purpose of making it camouflaged as an item. There is a reason the Mega Man 9 Mets have an activation radius of 3, and it's partially to make a throwback to Neo Mets on top of the Mega Man 1 Mets, but it's also because it functionally works for the camo variant specifically. Like, you're not going to know it's an illusion until you get close up and you shoot it. Oh, you know? But here, it kind of opens up almost when you scroll it on screen, and again, that defeats the purpose. Kind of have Yokus, they alternate in cycles of 2 for some reason, which is, I don't know how to feel about that. Obviously, the Anchor version of the Yoku block recolored with the Sheepman pink. Whatever. Here we have the enemy again. Maybe because it's near a pit, it works this way, so you could make an argue against the creation coding, but it's still an enemy you could just kill from a distance. So, like, and the normal variant of this enemy doubly so. So, I mean, it's just another Yeti to me. Kinda dumb, kinda pointless. Sometimes the power falls through, and yeah, you can probably guess that since the enemy was jumping over this, we probably don't want to go down there, and yeah, it's an illusion. I don't think anyone's gonna fall down there, and there's an obvious ladder, like, you should, like, it's just kind of a cosmetic thing. No one's really gonna complain about that in terms of unfairness, but it's not something that is, like, cleverly implemented either. The mage Gyros in this stage, I appreciate them for being functionally unique for once. Again, not a fan of Yoku blocks just alternating 1 and 2 like this. It feels very awkward and unnatural, and sometimes the... Ow. Head jumps are tricky too. They also don't... Despite having a very similar... It's technically color different, but the problem with having a similar sprite to... I have to clench my ass cheeks every time I do this. The problem with having a similar sprite to the regular Anchor Yokus and the regular Sheepman Yokus, etc., is in just making them square in general is that people are going to expect them to be solid and kind of boost you up if you clip into one, and not being completely jump-throughable. Like, I don't know, an Astroman Yoku. So, making them look more jump-throughable would justify their existence. But they don't work like that, so that's kinda... I don't know. And as for the Mage Jiro itself, sometimes it syncs up well with the Yokus, occasionally it doesn't. I don't know, usually it's not positioned defensively, but I don't know, it could feel a lot... I feel like some of the positions could be a lot better. That one you can kill from a distance, I don't know why it's there. This is, again, sort of a cosmetic thing. You can kind of tell which blocks you're supposed to stand on. It's not too big of a problem. Again, like, what I said about the frickin' illusion medals. Really, it's just the illusion's a cosmetic thing, and they just completely lower their guard. These Mage Gyros you can kind of skip. Not sure how to feel about that. Again, I like pacifism, but not when it's like, there's like no effort required to bypass things. It's usually not something common in Eternal, I guess. Not sure if I already mentioned it, but originally this stage was going to be called a seafront instead of ancient ruins. I guess just like a castle by the ocean. A mysterious oceanic castle. Some of the chains are cut off because they're arranged diagonally. It was planned to be a lot more mini-boss centric. But I guess since no mini-boss sprites were entered for this stage, that those plans fell through. So it was going to be a bit more Ringman Launch Octopus-esque, but instead we just get a bunch of really tanky enemies in our way. Like these Illumelians. They could have been a clever design if they like appeared and disappeared in different positions and then kind of like ambushed you, but you still have like time to avoid them. But here they just use the Captain Joe AI. You can kind of see them the moment you scroll them on screen. They're barely visible here, but even then the tongue like instantly gives away their attack. So yeah, it's kind of like a running. You can kind of start to see a running pattern that a lot of these illusions aren't really hard to figure out because they're not really illusions. They're more like a cosmetic thing. I kind of like this It's very similar to the Cloudman invisible platforms, but here I guess it makes a bit more sense. They're not really like utilized in like an overly challenging way. It's just like well, keep track of where you're standing. I feel like they could have been used a bit to fuller effect. And here we start to see Yoku's sort of. Sometimes they alternate by two, but then there are others that appear every other time, and it's kind of weird, like this middle pair. Going back to the cloud enemy, I kind of like the panic element. It's just kind of unfair when it actually gets you diagonally. This Jiro you can actually take out. So I'm actually not against this position because of how the Yokus are arranged in relation to it. It's just that the head jumping itself with Yokus is rather awkward. And it's not the last we'll see of them either. So here is like the one position where the illusion mets are kinda like, because, you know, you transition it's an isolated screen from a transition, so you have a lot more space. But even then it opens up kind of rapidly. Yep. Teleporting in place, I guess. Why make them teleport at all? To hit me, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, those blocks that kind of like those holographic blocks that kind of move upward. That's again just cosmetic. It's just for the scenery. This yeah, that Yoku pattern's a bit hard. You can do it, but again, like I said, head jumps in this level are a bit tricky. So, and again, it kind of makes your finger tired just dealing with damage wall after damage wall. I guess you could say like it improves upon 5 and that the 5 charge isn't broken anymore. It has its uses, but still not how I would like. They're only like making every enemy kind of tanky like this. Kind of get tired of it after a while. So gonna have to wait a bit. There we go. So that's kind of how you're supposed to do it, I guess. More Mage Jiro's a bit in the way. Now you kind of got to take out the, I guess, the statue before the J Telly's home downwards in your line of fire. So they kind of exist as damage sponges. I think Nico critiqued a power-up being up here, but it was guarded by spikes. That was an enemy drop. Whoops on him. Would have been cool to see that castle torch in the bottom left actually animated. Although, knowing Paige, you'd probably just give it like a really bad flicker effect instead of like, I don't know, checking frames and then just flipping the flame back and forth, which wouldn't be great, but it would be something. I don't know. Maybe I'm an asshole. Oh yeah, another thing about boss gates. Bye. Yeah, they don't lock you. They don't lock you in when you touch one, which is kind of weird. Doesn't feel again. It regardless of whether it was intentional or not, doesn't feel intentional, and that's why it's wrong. Or that's why I complain about it. So it's a bit easy to tell which illusion's which, even despite all the spamminess, because of which one, you know, spams Illusion Blast. The problem with this is that he teleports kind of all over the place, and he can indeed corner you. There is a... This is probably why I suck Rock Force's Robot Master fights dicks so much. Why I suck Rock Force's dick when it comes to Robot Master fights is because most of the patterns know how to make moves challenging in such a way where you can avoid them even if you're cornered, or in a way where you can escape being cornered or prevent cornering entirely. There is foresight put into the patterns that way. Here, Illusion teleports randomly, and then he spams Illusion Blast, which is only avoidable if you're far away from him, but that contradicts the fact that he teleports randomly. It's like, what do you want from me? Do you want me to keep my distance, even though I can't predict where he's going to move next, and I can't really move past him? And there he is. And again, because of Eternal's RNG, sometimes the fight's pathetically easy. Also, sometimes he can... Not sure what causes that to last as long as it does. But I am getting tired. I'm gonna spam decode. I'm sorry, Illusion man, but that's not how you create a randomly teleporting pattern. Again, look at frickin' Cryptman for, I don't know, an example. Yeah. There are, like, ways you can make both moves work, but not at the same time like that. That's not how you develop a pattern. The other illusions in the way are kind of distracting, but they're not, like, it's not like you can't see which one is the real one, especially you just check to see where your shots stop landing, you know. Autos shop. We have enough for another E-Tank. I'm going to take it. Feeling... Well, do you, punk? You can tell this is one of the first stages made. Obvious page graphics are obvious. Obvious 7 Famicom junk tiles are obvious. Mega Man 2 buildings and Gyro Man clouds are obvious. These cannons kind of explode after destroying themselves. They're slightly modified from their Super Ball Machine counterparts, I guess. They don't really the arcs don't really home in or do anything. You just kind of gotta keep your distance, I suppose. They're challenging in some contexts. But yeah, this is... Story-wise, this is supposed to be kind of like a combative air fleet. Like, it's like a ship. Wily starts making, like, armies of evil ships. Hey! So it's Captain Joe again, but Punk. It's Punk Joe, but with Captain Joe AI, very obviously. I probably shouldn't have shot at them so I could check at their actual HP. If it was 5 like the Captain Joe, I would have laughed my ass off. But here it's a bit hard to tell. I think that was 5, but another one will show up later, I guess. That was the stage. If you're expecting something similar to Blade's length, well, nope. It was a 2-screen thing. I don't... It doesn't feel... It's a bit strange to have a stage this short. Again, there's kind of an absence of self-consistency when it comes to this game, so this level is really short, and I'm not sure why. Like, what's the reason behind that? You can make it regular length or not. We also have Punk's pattern. Punk's fight isn't horribly designed, but he kind of has a problem similar to Illusion Man, where he can just drop, where after the triple shot projectile move, he can kind of just drop wherever, specifically where you are, and it's like, and the problem with it is kind of like, yeah, I guess it's random where he frickin', yeah, 135 degree. It's random where he's gonna land, and so sometimes the damage is unavoidable, and it doesn't feel right at all. I'm gonna have to... Oh yeah, now that we have weapons, you can see that you kind of cycle up and down. I could have just cycled up to get to the tanks, but still, like, what if... I don't know. It doesn't... Not how it would make the weapons cycle. I don't know. I can talk more about the pause menu later, but yeah. We've seen all that this fight has to offer. Somehow slightly worse than the original Game Boy Punk fight. Not all of the Mega Man Killer fights are a complete disservice. I mean, Blades was alright. Case in point! We have seen it in action. When you defeat an enemy in midair. When you defeat a boss fight. When you finish a boss fight in midair, that happens. Epilepsy, once again. Crypt Cloak. JK. Punk Needles. Kind of the closest thing to a screen nuke weapon in this. Again, we have time for one more Robot Master stage. I think I'll pick Clamp. Probably don't have any bolts yet. Had to check. Goodbye. Clamp time. Stage is a little interesting, I guess.
Ready.
I remember seeing dev footage, and the entire layout of the stage was made before enemies were implemented, so there's that. You can just fall off there, I guess if you want a quick game over or something. Which is a thing. The sky! Oh god, the sky. Obviously, the clouds and sun are taken from an ending cutscene of Mega Man 9 with Proto Man and Galaxy Man. Clouds are just kind of placed all over, like, spammed all over the place, and you can see the remnants of the original sort of like salmon background in the sun. There's like a, you know, like a mid-pixel there. Like a row of pixels where it's like a slightly different shade of orange, and then the same for the upper section of the sky. Some Shade Man, no, some Slash Man, Rockman, some Famicom plant stuff. But the other orange tiles are, as far as I know, exclusively by page. So there's that. It's kind of cool to have these foreground effects yet again. Here we have hopping enemies that for once actually work in a way you'd expect them to. I forget the names of these guys, but I recall it being... I recall Raging Bonobo already having a name planned for them, and then Paige just gave it a different name. So, whatever. I'll have to go back and look at the specifics. Not a bad opening stretch, a bit basic, in comparison to a lot of the other Eternal levels, but oh yeah, we also have the four Gabiole, the Garyobi, except it works nothing like the four Garyobi, despite having the original name and sprite of the four Garyobi. It doesn't move more quickly when you're on its level. It dings to most weapons, and again, the 135-degree reflection. We also have, of course, these insta-kill crusher clamps, which are... Their narrowness is obviously inspired by the Mega Man 5 Wily 1 crushers, although the stage itself is supposed to be generally Dustman inspired. We also have, of course, obligatory Metal Man background elements. Originally, the clouds were going to be the regular Gyro Man clouds. This is not how I would do a screen. It's kind of an... again, not teaching the player, we just sudden difficulty spike. This is our first encounter with the conveyors using the Sheepman sprite, and already, the moment we land, they pull us towards spikes for some reason. We're going to be holding right as we enter, I suppose, but it's still kind of an FU. And on top of that, we have a Hammer Joe, which if this is your first encounter with one, well, then you're going to possibly take it up the ass, get knocked back into the conveyor, and die. So, yeah. Not how I would do things. It feels a bit sudden and spontaneous. I don't know how I dodged that. I guess it's a difficulty curve compared to the previous Garyobi. But here, we start to see what feels like an inoffensive stage. We have conveyors, and they are mixing adequately with the clamps. And we have sort of reasonable-looking enemy positions. There is no actual intended difficulty curve. Because, like I said, the physical layout was made before the Mega Maker transition! Mega Maker transitions are my favorite. The actual layout was made before the enemy positions themselves, so not everything... The enemy positions feel a bit randomly generated, like a Coca-Run level. And on top of that, it's just kind of conveyors and clamps throughout the entire stage. The progression is dead. There isn't really like a difficulty curve or spike. I mean, okay, there are occasional, like, jumps in difficulty here and there, but it doesn't, like... It just sticks to conveyors and, conveyors and clamps throughout the whole stage, and so it doesn't really feel like there's a good progression going on. Yeah. There is a way both could be used tactfully, independently of each other, and then mixed in some circumstances in different contexts, but together like this throughout the whole thing, it feels pretty one-note as a stage. Yeah. And Nico has already pointed out the many glitches you can perform with these clamps. I don't really feel like demonstrating. It's one of the less offensive levels because nothing's really unfair about it. But at the same time, it's just repeating the same shit over and over. Not how I would introduce this either, although you do have space to see what it does, technically. I guess it's passable as a teaching element. You shoot the thing, it goes up, and it lands, and it's pretty clever. That's kind of an example of when the sprite was already, like, good enough to warrant an interesting pattern. Probably the best enemy in the game. I mean, the two best enemies in the game. We also have a Picado 24 from Mega Man 4. Here, it is actually colored differently, so despite having 6 HP, it doesn't feel unreasonable. I think it has Mega Man 1 reflection, yeah. Yeah, now that one has Mega Man 1 reflection. So, like I said, 3 different types of reflections for these enemies, and It's inconsistent, but I guess that. But here, the bullets don't spawn even though it's slightly on screen. So that's the thing with not being able to scroll enemies off screen or on screen, or them just being on screen all the time. You can have situations like this in which you can just kind of spawn exploit it. And even if you didn't do that, otherwise it's just going to kind of shot combo you into itself, and the bullet's otherwise kind of tedious to get. So I mean, This other one is not too bad of a position because presumably doesn't. I've never seen it set off as you make that jump from here to here, and so you can kind of see it in advance and then go. So that's not terrible. That's a good position, kind of by coincidence. These are just kind of the same positions, kind of up in your way, but not really like ramping up any difficulty curve. Like there are previous positions that are harder or easier or about the same, so their existence doesn't really feel justified. It feels a bit more like a chore, these Claw Jiros as they're known. And again, we already have Hammer Joes, so again, having Joes and Jiros in the same stage feels redundant. I guess it's kind of like mimicking one of Five's negative traits that I forgot to mention, where sometimes they'll have stages that kind of have redundant enemy types mixed with each other, like multiple ground travelers. So you'll have like Subails and Mouse Subails in the same stage, or Mouse Subails and Cuckoo Eggs all in the same stage, and it feels wrong. And that enemy, again, you can kill from afar. I don't know why it's there. This is where the clamp positioning gets a little tight and hard. Again, sometimes there's a difficulty curve, but it's rather slow. Oops. I guess the actual knockback distance isn't offensive, but again, it's the short iframes. You don't really have a lot of time to move out of the way. It's nice to see a short section with lyric tellies, I guess, in terms of being a change of pace, even if they appear in every other stage, kind of like Mets. Yeah. This is actually interesting, and like Nico said, it's kind of like a hats off, even though it feels kind of largely by coincidence. What? This is another way you can do it. Timing it properly. It's a thing. It feels right. Feels justified. This, again, kill from a distance. The problem with these with reusing the sheep conveyors specifically is that they weren't really intended for this kind of moving in a regular direction. They were originally made with the intent of, hey, they're like conveyors that you actually push and you can move them in either direction, and so they don't really like need arrows indicating where they go, but otherwise it's hard to tell from a distance which direction a sheep conveyor is moving. So here, it technically moves right, and you can kind of see that if you look carefully at it, but there aren't arrows indicating otherwise, and that makes it kind of hard to tell at first. Which can be annoying, especially if... So yeah, that's kind of what happens when you defy the original intent of a sprite. It doesn't always work well into the gameplay. And here, this ending stretch is kind of the same as what we've seen before. Not really like a difficulty curve. It's just kind of up and down, but with the curve, that is. But with the same two gimmicks. And this gimmick combination isn't really all that inventive or new, especially if you've played Metal Man. You have the vertical clamps, and you have the conveyors pushing in a different horizontally. And yeah, but that's just the whole stage this time, and it's to death now. So that's a thing. Again, because of that, it feels a bit like a nothing stage, even though it's a bit more gimmick-centric and not just damage tanks in your way, so it feels a bit more like a regular stage, even though there's no real, like, intent behind where, like, no deliberate forethought put into where things are positioned at all. Goodbye. I'm kidding. Clamp's actually probably the second best pattern next to Frigid. Maybe even slightly better, I don't know. He's not all that bad, even though the nice punk throwback with the entrance. Even though the random falling shit in your way is, well, kind of random. Oh yeah, that's another problem with this fight that we'll see again in Scorch. I do like how it's relatively easy to mash out of the clamp. Apparently there's a... Yeah, I think there's like a big difference between... Mixed feelings about that move. You kind of gotta stick to the edge if you want to reliably avoid that. Oh yeah, hitboxes, am I right? You kind of have to keep your distance if you want to reliably avoid that in advance. I guess one of the... Yeah, I'm a keyboard player. One of the major differences... One of the major gameplay differences between playing with a keyboard and playing with a controller, I suppose, is that with a controller, it's a lot easier to mash out of things. So because this was a bit... Even though, like, Paige uses a controller usually when playing, for this game, I suppose, because it's Game Maker, it's a bit... Oh, I didn't even realize he does, like, a Needleman thing where the claw extends, I guess because I've never gone close range to him like that before. It's a thing that happens. But no, my problem is that he uses the same sprite and general telegraph for when he's about to rocket forward, but only sometimes does he rocket back and forth, and sometimes he just rockets to your location specifically. So sometimes he performs that move, but as you saw earlier, sometimes he just rockets to your location, and it's a bit hard to anticipate which one he's going to do, so it's a bit unfair in that sense. I would have cut one of those moves because it's using the same sprite for a completely different attack, and so it's hard, again, it's kind of unavoidable damage that way. Very messy, a bit messy of a fight, but otherwise, it's not terrible. You can reliably avoid most of what he does, even though there's random shit falling everywhere. It feels dodgeable enough so that it's almost on par with Frigid, I suppose. I don't really have a strong opinion on it, but yeah, that's a fight. And that kind of does it for today, I think. Yep. Until next time, this is Lava Man, signing off.